All right. Next in our whirlwind of post inauguration crypto actions is the SEC having rescinded the crypto rule SAB 121, which now clears a path for banks to enter into the Bitcoin custody services industry. So, Kyle, as you may remember, the SEC had this directive that required banks to report cryptocurrencies held in custody as liabilities on their balance sheet, which then were subjected to capital reserve requirements, which effectively meant that if a bank were to hold crypto in custody, they would have to have like an oodles of cash on hand to like balance that out, which was just completely financially untenable. They just couldn't do it. So yoink, it's gone. Banks can now, in theory, now custody crypto. But as far as I've seen, there hasn't been like a rush of institutional banks saying, "Hey, come get your crypto custody services here." So, what do you think? Is this going to happen, or make a real change in the, uh, in what's happening on the ground?
I definitely think this is going to be an enormous change for a couple of reasons. First off, this SAB 121 uh, required banks to treat all crypto assets as liabilities, regardless of whether they were risky or not. And the problem with that is that the SEC played a role in creating the regulatory risk in the first place. So you have this doom loop of a problem where they're the ones making it risky, and then you have to classify it as a liability. I'm sorry, that is absolute bullshit. And one of my best friends worked at Silicon Valley Bank, and we were at Coachella last year. And in the middle of Coachella on Sunday, he gets an alert. He worked there, and he says, "Oh, I have an 8 a.m. Monday morning meeting at the bank." And we all knew it was going to happen. And the next day, the rug got pulled out from under them. This is definitely a step in the right direction. Now, basically, the way it's going to work is financial institution that holds, say, $10 million in crypto, it can say only 5% of that is risky and only treat 5% of it as a liability on their balance sheet. It just makes vastly more sense the way banks are structured and the way the SEC was just hammering these banks. It's ridiculous that they treated it this way.
Well, I agree that it's ridiculous, but something you just said is like, well, we only have to allocate like 5% risk to Bitcoin. And candidly, it's been quite resilient. And I know, when DeepSeek came out the other day and Nvidia went down like 17% and the Nasdaq cratered, Bitcoin kind of was pretty cozy. It went down to 99,000, but otherwise kind of rebalanced and still, six figures today. So I get that. But as you were saying that, it makes me think, well, is this a way that systematic risk gets reintroduced into the banking system by having banks custody assets, which are still, in my opinion, extremely volatile. And that's I mean that in like the most loving way. But when you have a financial institution, like there's like the Jenga towers built on top of this, and
Sure.
then something goes awry, does that not introduce like significant risk?
Well, I mean, in theory it does, but these banks are still subject to banking regulations. Those have not gone away. They're still subject to the same accounting standards that they were. They still have, FASB reporting and, and the peekaboo reporting and all those banking regulations and the alphabet soup of those agencies. So those aren't going away. So they can't just willy nilly declassify risk. But they have more wiggle room and they don't just have to classify 100% of it as a liability on the balance sheet. That is such an improvement over where we were.
You know what it sounds like to me, that we need a comprehensive regulatory framework to help people out here.
Hell, you say.